is how he loved in difficult places.
Okay, I know all about leading a good life. Because I'm a good monk. And good monks have good times. Now remember this. Teaching a retreat, before we had our retreat centre over in Perth, we had to hire other retreat centres. So this one was a Catholic retreat centre next to a church. I remember waiting for the next person to come in for their interviews, looking through the window and see two Catholic men. They'd just been to church, they were shaking hands, saying goodbye to each other. They're good friends. And one said to the other, "Be good." The other one said, "No, that's no fun." And I thought, that's sad. Because a lot of people, even the lazy, think to have fun, you have to be bad, you have to be naughty, you have to go and do stupid things. I thought that too, when I was young. But even as a student, I realized that having a good time, you didn't need to sort of exploit your own body or exploit other people. You could still have a good time without alcohol. You could still have a good time without sleeping with every girl who came along your way. You could have a good time just without cheating other people. You could have a good time by being good. And when I learned that, I realized that one of the reasons in all our societies throughout the world, the rise of people and leaders have always been encouraging virtue. It's not just so you can go to heaven after you die, so you can go to heaven before you die. In other words, so you can live a good, happy, peaceful life. I think that's the message which should be sold much more in our world. The good people have a happy time. The good people succeed. The good people have peace and happiness in their hearts and lots of friends. Because look, what type of person do you want to be? One of my disciples in Sydney, he is a business person, has his own company. He was negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal with some Taiwanese business people. They got to the stage where they were about to sign the contract. So a delegation of Taiwanese came to Sydney. They met in a hotel, they discussed the final details, everything was agreed, only necessary now was the signatures. So they said, "We'll sign tonight. You take us out this evening to a bar for alcohol and you supply us with girls, prostitutes." He said, "What?" He said, "This is how we're going to do it. You supply the alcohol and the girls and then we'll sign the contract." He said, "No. I'm a Buddhist. I keep my 5 precepts. I'm happily married. I don't want to go out with a girl, not even just for a night." And the Taiwanese got upset. They said, "This is what we expected. This is what we'll get. Otherwise we won't sign." And then the man was faced with a dilemma which many people face. Should you break your precepts and sign a very lucrative deal and mean your business flourishes and you can look after your family and get the sort of life you need and give donations to temples? Or should you stand your ethical ground and say, "No"? He didn't really hesitate. He said, "No, I don't break precepts. I'm faithful to my wife." So he said, "Fine, no contract." And he left. He went home, half disappointed because the contract had fallen apart, but also feeling this wonderful moral strength inside of you. You've done something good. You stood up for what was right. You feel this incredible sense of energy and goodness inside of you. Later at night he received a phone call. The Taiwanese business people said, "We've been discussing you. We'd rather do business with someone who keeps precepts and doesn't cheat on their wife, because then you're not going to cheat on us. Are you still up? We're coming round to your house." They came round and signed the contract.
because it was a wonderful thing. Doesn't that make common sense? In business, would you rather do business with people who overseas go and get drunk and go sleep with prostitutes? Is that the sort of person you can trust? So he got his contract and he's doing very well. It shows that good people actually do succeed in life. So sometimes we think that no, we have to cut corners to succeed. Business is tough. Yeah, you can be a Buddhist in a temple, but out there in the real world, you have to be mean, you have to be tough. It's a dog-eat-dog world. If you want to be a dog, fine. But if you want to be a human being, so be good. And if you are good, you get more happiness and more success. And this idea of love in the difficult places, sometimes that when difficult things do happen to you, as I was saying, it gives you this wonderful fertilizer for life. In the difficult situations, you learn so much. One of the news stories I was going to try and fit in somewhere, these are stories which, since the last time I was here, they're news stories, so most of you haven't heard these unless you go on the internet. It's the story of the mouse. Once upon a time, there was a mouse who lived in a farmhouse in an Australian farm. He was quite a happy mouse. He was a very good mouse and had lots of friends in the farmyard. And one day he just happened to be looking through a crack in the wall when he saw the farmer's wife come in. She'd been shopping in town and she bought a package. He thought, being a mouse, she's bought a cake or some pie, because if she bought food from town, there will surely be a few crumbs for me. And so the mouse was licking his lips, expecting some food special from town. And as he watched eagerly as the wife opened the package, his excitement turned to terror, because inside the package was a mouse trap. Oh no, they're trying to kill me. Imagine if someone brought an electric chair back into your home, or a string with a noose on the end. You'd be scared. And imagine what it's like for a mouse to see a trap. Oh my goodness, they're trying to kill me. This is terrible. This is a disaster. And he went outside to see his friend, Mrs. Chicken. Mrs. Chicken, it's terrible. They brought a mouse trap. They're going to kill me. Mrs. Chicken said, well, nothing to do with me. Mouse traps can't kill chickens. It's your own problem. Sort it out yourself. But you're my friend. Well, I don't care about that. Nothing to do with me. So Mr. Mouse was very upset. His time of need, his best friend, Mrs. Chicken, wouldn't help. So then he went to see his second friend, it was Mr. Pig. Mr. Pig, it's a disaster. I'm so afraid. The farmer's wife has bought a mouse trap. Mr. Pig, oink, nothing to do with me. They don't catch pigs in mouse traps. Look after yourself. We're all owners of our own karma. What you can do, you can pray to Kuan Yin to help you, but that's all I can do for you. Thank you very much, said Mr. Mouse. Left. Went to see his last friend, Mrs. Cow. Mrs. Cow, I feel so abandoned and afraid. There's a mouse trap in my house, and all my friends have abandoned me. You stick by me. Can you please suggest something which will help me? And Mrs. Cow said, look, I'm too busy to help you. I've got too much grass to eat. Look after yourself. So none of Mr. Mouse's friends would help him. So that night, Mr. Mouse had a very sleepless night. In the middle of the night, he woken up by a sound of the mousetrap going off. And that sound woke up the farmer's wife too. And she came down the stairs in the dark. Because it was dark, she didn't see that in the mousetrap was the tail of a snake. He caught a snake. And because the head was still free, the snake bit the farmer's wife, and the mouse saw it all. And when she screamed, the farmer came down, and he rushed his wife to hospital, where they gave her some medicine and told her to go back to bed and stay 2 or 3 days in bed so she could recover. The farmer brought her home, and the farmer thought, my goodness, my wife is sick. What can I get her so she might get better? So he thought, I know, chicken soup. So he caught that chicken, chopped off his head and boiled it for chicken soup. But no matter how much chicken soup, she didn't really get better. So he told all his relatives and friends, and they came down to visit her and look after her. He thought, my goodness, with all these people coming, how can I feed everybody? I know, Mr. Pig. So he escorted Mr. Pig and made lots of sausages and bacon for all the visitors. But unfortunately, even with all the chicken soup and all the people coming, she got so sick she died. And the only way to pay for the funeral was to slaughter the cow and sell the meat so to pay for the funeral service. And so in the end, because Mrs. Chicken, Mr. Pig and Mrs. Cow refused to help their friend, Mr. Mouse, all those 3 died because of the mouse trap. And the moral of that story is, just because you think it doesn't concern me, it's none of my business. Yes, it is your business. It does concern you. So don't think it's not my problem. Otherwise, you might end up as chicken soup, or as pork sausages, or as steak and roast beef, just like those poor animals did because they refused to help their friend. So that's a little story about how important it is to help each other. But when we do good things for each other, it comes back on us. If those 3 animals had remembered the law of karma and been kind to their friend, Mr. Mouse, Mr. Mouse, then everyone would have survived. Because we're all in this life together. And that's the reason why we should all try to be good. And it's not just being good, as I say, to go to heaven or to protect yourself. You get so much happiness about being good. You know, one of the most wonderful things of being a monk is when people come up to you and say, because of your talks, because of your instructions, because of all the things which you said, that you saved my life. You saved my marriage. I was in a really bad state, and because of the Dharma, my life was totally turned around. I'm a happy person again. Hundreds of people said that to me. In the new edition of Open the Door of Your Heart, when they asked for another preface to the second edition, I thought, what could I write? It just happened a week or 2 beforehand. A woman had appeared in my monastery in Perth of Serpentine. She said she'd come all the way from Bern in Switzerland. She said she'd come all that way for one reason, and it was to see me. She said that she had cancer, anxiety disorders, depression. She was a physical and mental mess. And her doctor and psychologist had tried so many medicines, nothing was working. And almost out of desperation, her psychologist in Switzerland had given her a book called Die Kuh Divinity. It is a German edition of Open the Door of Your Heart, The Cow That Cried. She read that from cover to cover. In 2 months' time, her cancer was in full remission, and her anxiety and depression was so recovered, the doctor took her off all the medication and told her you were fine. She came all the way to Perth to say thank you, to saving her life. And you know that very often I'm not in town, Because many people will be trying to find me today, and I'm here in KL. I happened to be there. So she was so overjoyed. And she gave me the copy, the German copy of Open the Door of Your Heart, which you could see was so old, it had been read and read and read. It was like dog-eared and dirty. Can you please sign it for me? So I signed it, and as I was signing, she just cried and cried and cried. Now imagine what that does to someone like me. Imagine what that would do to you. The fruit of goodness, of kindness, of really helping someone is one of the most wonderful feelings in the world. You get so much happiness and joy of having been of so much service that someone would buy an expensive airticket to fly halfway around the world just to say thank you. I wrote that story in the preface of the second edition of Open the Door of Your Heart. Now that's what goodness does. And now I value goodness so much that I love goodness. I'm passionate about goodness. I'm attached to goodness. But that's actually the right thing to be attached to. Sometimes people say you shouldn't be attached to anything. No, remember the spiritual life is like climbing up a ladder. You have to attach to the rungs above you and let go of the rungs below you to climb up the spiritual ladder. You have to attach. That pulls yourself up, and then later on what you're attached to you can let go sometime later. In the spiritual life, always attach and cling to your aspirations and inspirations until you're beyond those. But in the meantime, please attach to doing good. And then you find so much love and peace, and other people love you as well. Because I'm a monk who's celibate, but I have so many lovers. But they love you on another way. Not for sex or marriage or anything like that. But they love you out of respect, out of kindness. In the deeper sense of love. And that's where we find the love in the most unexpected places. Because people think that, to find love in this world, you have to be physically attractive if you're a girl. Or wealthy and powerful if you're a man. Yes, the stupid people think like that. But you always know that a beautiful girl, her beauty doesn't last. And if she relies totally on her beauty to attract a boy, she's got nothing in reserve for when her beauty fades. So when her beauty goes, boys, you're lost. There's nothing left. But ugly girls are great. Because they really have to develop all of their other characteristics. They have to be charming and a good cook and kind and wonderful to you. That's the only way they can attract a boy. So, boys, only marry ugly girls. They're much better in the long run. And as for you girls, wealthy men. If they're that wealthy, they can also afford mistresses as well. If you marry a poor guy, who's really kind and caring to you, at least you don't have to worry about him having a mistress. He can't afford one. So, girls, marry poor guys. Guys, marry ugly girls. Okay. You know what we mean about finding love in strange places. Because what we're doing here, we're learning about what love really is and how we can love. So things at first, we're ugly girl, how can you love her? Poor guy, how can you love him? But really, the love actually takes another dimension. And we all know that the spiritual path centers and dances around an idea of love. And it's not just a romantic love. It's something which is higher and more beautiful and brilliant. Yeah, we have the romantic love. And there is something spiritual in that. When a boy loses himself totally in a girl, when a girl loses himself in a boy, there's always something which is very inspiring about that. That's why they have the old saying, I think with Shakespeare, all the world loves a lover. It's something sweet and cute when you see two people with stars in their eyes. One of the reasons is because at that time, the people aren't thinking about themselves anymore. They're thinking about the other. It's not quite yet up to real love, but there's still there's a sense of selflessness there. A sense of devotion to the happiness of someone else. And that is an inspiring part of love. Unfortunately, when you get married, it doesn't last all that long. But there is something there which we're inspired by, which is why all of the movies, well not all of them, but most of them, there's always a love story in there, somewhere. Even if it's saving the world from 2012 catastrophe, I'm sure in that movie there's a love story in there somewhere. It always has to be a love story. I haven't seen that movie, but is there a love story in it? Yeah, of course. So, why do they put love stories in there? Because there is something inspiring about it. Now, I'm not trying to take out the stupid part of love, the stuff which doesn't last. And let's have a look at sort of the real meaning of that love then. And I think I mentioned, well, this was I think earlier. Often, as a monk, I perform marriage blessings. These people come to me, some of these people I've known for years, and they're getting married now, and they insist, Ajahn Brahm, can you please come and do the blessing service for us? Even though as a Theravada monk, I'm not actually allowed to perform the legal part of that marriage. So we have a marriage ceremony, but I do the religious part. And even so, people always say that Ajahn Brahm married us. So I've actually married many women. Sometimes people say, have you ever been married, Ajahn Brahm? Actually, I've married many women. But only as the marriage blesser. But one of the most important parts of that ceremony, and one which has meaning to each one of you, is when I look at the two people who just got married. Yeah, I did say this last night, didn't I? Can't remember anyway. I look at the two people who just got married. I look into the groom's eyes, first of all, and tell him, from now on, from this moment on, you should never think of yourself. And the groom nods. Yes. He looks at his new wife and smiles. And I look at her too and say, from this moment on, you should think of yourself either. And she looks at him and smiles sweetly. And I still look at the bride and say, from this moment on, you shouldn't think of yourself. And you shouldn't think of him either. She gets confused. And I look at her, him, and said, from now on, you shouldn't think of her either. And I pause to let them think, what the hell is this monk going on about? And then I tell them, from this moment on, you should never think of yourselves, nor should you think of the other. You should only think about us. Marriage is not about me. It's not about my partner. It's all about us. There's a very subtle point which changes the whole dynamics of love. Because usually in a marriage in Malaysia among Buddhists, you will usually find that one partner is Hinayana and the other one is Mahayana. One person is only thinking about themselves and the other person is sacrificing themselves for their partner. Both are wrong. In the same way that sometimes people say, oh, Theravada, that's Hinayana. You're just interested in your own enlightenment, so selfish. And Mahayana, you give up your own happiness. The most important thing to you is stop yourself getting enlightened to help all other beings. Both are totally nothing to do with Buddhism. In the same way, thinking about yourself or thinking about the other is nothing to do with love. In a relationship, you're in it together. It's all about us. Not me, not him, not her, but us. Which means, if there's a problem in your marriage, it's not his problem. It's not her problem. It's not my problem. Whose problem is it? Our problem. That's right. It's not Hinayana, Mahayana. We don't sacrifice ourselves for others or sort of just be selfish. We're always in it together. It's all about our enlightenment, not my enlightenment, not your enlightenment, but about our path. Where do I understand that? Understand what love truly is. You're not sacrificing yourself for your partner. You're sacrificing your partner and yourself for us. For something even bigger. Because when we have that type of love, it really becomes totally selfless. It's not just even us as a pair in a marriage. It's our family, it's our community, it's our monastery, it's our society. So sometimes when I look at what I do, it's nothing to do about me, nothing to do about you. It's always about us, our Buddhist community. And that's why I love being with you. I really enjoy my life. I love my life. Why is that? It's because wherever I'm in KL or Singapore or Thailand or England or Frankfurt or Australia, wherever I am, I'm always with my friends, my community. The wonderful thing that you understand the meaning of what love really is. And part of that love, when it's not about me, not about you, there's no place anymore for criticism or fault-finding. Because sometimes you think, if you don't understand Buddhism, if you break the precepts, whose fault is it anyway? It's my fault for not teaching you properly. No matter how many years have I been coming to Malaysia, and how many of you have been coming for talk after talk after talk, and still you're not enlightened. Whose fault is it? My fault. I must be a terrible teacher. Look, if I was a school teacher, and if I was teaching a class, and the children were coming back year after year after year to the same class, I'd get the sack as a teacher. But me, they keep coming back to the same talks, the same retreats, the same, they keep coming back year after year after year. So I must be a terrible teacher. No, that's not how we look at things. So instead of fault-finding, instead of judging, whenever I teach a retreat, whenever I give a series of talks all day like this, do I give you report cards afterwards? To see how much attention we're giving, A, B, C, D, E, or F? What the questions were, A, B, C, D, E, or F? Do I give you an examination at the end of the session to see how much you learned? Do you give me a score? After the talks, you get the organising committee putting up signs like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to give me a score. And that's not how we do things, is it? We don't judge. Real love is when you don't judge. And that's how we can have the love in the most unexpected places. When we judge, we can only have love with people and events that we like. When we don't judge, it's amazing, you can love all sorts of people. You can have love to those people in jail. Many times I've been to prison and I've seen people who've done horrendous, vicious crimes, who cause so much pain to other people. But I've seen such beautiful people in those jails. It's a strange thing that there you're facing a rapist, someone who's maybe violated a child, one of the most horrendous crimes you can imagine. You're looking and facing them, and you see this beautiful heart inside. First of all, it made no sense to me. These are supposed to be monsters. That's a rapist. But after a while, I realized there aren't any rapists in jail. There aren't any murderers or thieves or fraudsters in jail. All there are in prisons are people who've murdered, people who've stolen, a person who has raped. And that's so much different than a rapist. A rapist is that's all they are. That's the sum total of their being. And that's why you can't love someone like that. That's all they are. A rapist. How can you love a rapist? Impossible. They just should be thrown away, left to rot, executed, tortured themselves, whatever, because they've done a terrible crime. They're just a rapist. But if you realise they're not a rapist, but a person who's done a rape, then you see another part of them, a bigger part of them, and that's the part you can love. The strange thing happened. This was a natural for me to see the beauty in that person. When I saw the beauty in that person, surprisingly, not now I suppose, but at the time, they started to see the beauty in themselves. They realized they weren't a thief. They were a person who stole it. But I saw the other part of them, the beautiful, good part. And because I saw it, they could see it too. Because they saw it. That was the part of them which grew. The bad part of them vanished. Many of those people in jail, when they were released, were reformed. Not because they went through some special program, simply because they started to recognize the 998 good bricks in their wall, rather than 2 bad bricks. I won't repeat that story. Those of you who want to know what I'm referring to, if you don't know already. The book is available outside in the foyer for a very reasonable price. I'll even sign it for you afterwards. But the meaning of that story is, if you just see the 2 bad bricks in the wall, you're just seeing the crime a person being put in jail for. You're judgmental, you can't see anything else, you want to destroy the wall. You want to destroy that person. If you see the other part, the beautiful, good part, you can love them. Which is why you can even love your husband who's cheated on you. How can I do that? How many times have they cheated on you? How many bad bricks are in their wall? How many good bricks are in that wall? Many years ago, I don't know how many years ago, here in Malaysia, I was giving a talk at USM. I think somewhere to the north of, the campus was to the north of K or something, I forget where it was. It was in a university, and at the end of the talk, question time, this woman stood up, she was a lecturer, and she said, "This morning my husband lied to me. Should I get divorced? I can't trust him anymore, he's lied." That was the question. How would you answer? I first of all wanted more information. So getting more information is called procrastination. It gives you more time to think. Well, the government does. Do a survey. You get some all this. Anyway, I asked, "What are you doing in this university?" She said she was teaching maths. She was a maths professor. I saw my opportunity. I said, "How long have you been married?" She said, 3 years. I said, "Okay. To answer your question, I'm going to do some statistics. 3 years of marriage. Let's call that 1,000 days. And let's assume, it's a valid assumption, that over the 3 years of your marriage, your husband, on average, has said 10 things to you every day, which could be right or could be wrong. In other words, since you've been married, he's made 10,000 statements to you, which could be right or which could be wrong. Now he's lied for the first time. According to probability theory, the next time he opens his mouth and says something on past behaviour, there's a 10,000 to 1 chance he's telling the truth. That's pretty trustworthy to me. So what do you mean you can't trust it? 10,000 to 1? That's worth backing. So, why is it, I told her, the one lie and you want to break up a marriage of 10,000 honest days? She understood, so they're still together. Now do you understand how judgmental and negative we become? Which means that we sacrifice love far too easily. One fall, one mistake, and we say, right, that's it, I'm going to destroy our relationship. I can't stand you any longer. I found love in those strange places. I can love criminals. That really shocked me. I can love people who abuse me. That really shocked me. I don't know if you can do that. It's because I never saw the abuse. I never saw the crime. I saw the person in there. They were beautiful, wonderful people inside. That was them. That's what I focused on. When I started to do that, you could love anybody. And of course, people love me because in jail, very, very few people get respect. And there was this monk coming who treated them like people, not criminals. And they just blossomed. And once, I don't mind saying this, it's self-praise, but it's no self-ignorance. I don't mind doing this, it's pretty safe. I remember getting a call from one of the prison officers. They wanted to speak to me personally. I said, how can I help? They said, can you please come back to teach in prison? I said, well, look, I'm so busy now, going around teaching in KL and all over the place, in Singapore and Thailand and Indonesia, all over the place. I'm so busy now. I said, no, we want you to come back. I'll send one of my monks. No, we want you. I said, why me? He said, and this was one of the best accolades I've ever received, he said, I've been in the prison service in Western Australia all my life, for 30 years or more. I've noticed something very extraordinary. All the prisoners who came to your class, when released, never returned to jail. I've never seen that before. Will you please come back? I thought it felt so wonderful for that. They come to my class and never gone back to jail again. Why? I just told you why. Because I can give them love. Not just fake love. Not just saying, I'll love you if you change your ways and become a really good person. They were a good person, just with a few faults in them. I never focus on the faults, I focus on the goodness. I can love that. And that grew. In the same way in your marriage, love the beautiful part of your partner, forgive the mistakes, don't be judgmental. And you will find that what you love and respect in your partner in your marriage, that's what will grow. And they won't go playing around with other women or men anymore. Try it, it actually works. But then you take it even further. How you can love some of the difficult parts of life. Because it's exactly the same. You get sacked for work, you lose your money, someone cheats you, you get cancer, your best friend dies. All these other tragedies of life. Is that all that life is? Here's just a good example. There's when was it? In October, August, September, somewhere around that time last year. A family came to me during our rain retreat. It was supposed to be quiet and silent, but they insisted on coming. Because that morning, they'd found their 17-year-old son on the end of a rope in the veranda of their house. He hung himself. Committed suicide. And they woke up in the morning, got up for breakfast, and their other son, who was about 11, 12 years old, saw his elder brother hanging dead on the end of a rope. And can you imagine the pain? So they came to me totally distraught. One of the things, they were Sri Lankan Buddhists. They were afraid, what sort of karma has he done? Is he going to hell? For suicide? He was about to do his end of year exams. So I used that as a simile. Look, when you're doing your A-levels or O-levels, this was his university entrance, let's call it A-levels. How many subjects do your children do at A-levels to get to university? 3, sometimes 4. In every subject, how many papers? Usually 2. So that's 6 or 8 exam papers you have to do to get to university. In every paper, how many questions are there? Let's say 6 or 7, 8 questions you have to answer. There's about 60 questions your kid has to answer to get to university. What happens if they mess up one of those 60 questions? If they make a complete mess of one of those questions, does that mean they can't go to university? Not if they answer all the other 59 well. So that's what your son has done. In life's examination, he's messed up the last question. He's killed himself. That doesn't mean you're going to go to heaven and have a good rebirth. What else has he done in his life? And of course, they said he's a good boy. He's really kind. He was diligent at school, helping his friends. He's a really good boy. So, well, there you go. You got 59 out of 60. That's enough to go to heaven. And a simple analogy like that took away a lot of their pain. Because what we were doing there, we weren't just focusing judgmentally on just one terrible act of committing suicide and forgetting the rest of that whole 17-year-old person's life. Our judgmentalism it was being judgmental. We just focus on one thing, get so upset and sad that someone's committed suicide. What about the rest of their life? Put that into the picture. Then one can realize they're not a suicidal person. They're a person who's committed suicide. That person is much bigger, huge. Which is how you can find peace. And they have found peace. They're devoted disciples now. Even their kid, their 12-year-old, 13-year-old, is amazing. He's changed. He came into that room and he was just basically traumatized. Wasn't talking. When he came out afterwards, he understood his brother's death. Probably understood it quicker than the parents. He was laughing and telling jokes. He's always almost like devoted as a Buddhist now. Because he got it. He understood. He's not traumatized anymore. This is what we mean about finding love in the most difficult situations. Because sometimes the suicide of a child, especially a son, is so hard to understand. That's how you can understand it. I'm not quite sure, I told the mother, I'm not quite sure why he did that, what reason he had. But don't blame him. Love him. To say, as to say in that book, Son, the door of my heart is fully open to you. No matter what you ever do, no matter where you ever go, even if you commit suicide, the door of my heart is totally open to you. That's what we call unconditional love. Unconditional love is that type of love which can still flourish in the darkest places of the world. There's unconditional love which I practice in the business. There's unconditional love for your son who committed suicide, which I shared with the parents so they could come to peace with that event. They could love their child and give him their blessings to God. The greatest of love is to let a person go, to let them be. They will never understand. I was told them, you would never ever comprehend the day you die why your son did that. Asking the question why is a question which will never find an answer. A circle with no ending to it. But you don't need to answer that question to come to closure. Closure happens when you open the door of your heart to your son. Son, go with our blessings. The door of our heart is open to you. We miss you, but we love you. Go with our love, not with our pain. That's true story, recent story. I love peppering these talks with anecdotes. They're not theory anymore. This is actually how you can find love in the most difficult and painful situations. You're beginning to open the door of your heart to life. With all its difficulties and problems, all its arguments and disappointments. Because, we have those conflicts, we have those sicknesses, we have those tragedies. We also have so much beauty as well. We should not just focus on what goes wrong in life, or in our life, or in our partner. You do that, you're missing out on life. Your partner's karma is their karma. Your karma is to love them. Your kids, I don't know how they'll turn out, where they'll go, what they do. You love them anyway. And most of all, you and love. Open the door of your heart to yourself. Don't be critical of you. You're not perfect. I ain't perfect. I make such silly jokes. Here's a silly joke. There was about to be a flood. Those of you have to have a Christian background to understand this, but most of you went to Christian schools, even though if you're a Buddhist. You're all heretics just like me. And God told Noah there was going to be another flood. This time God said, I want you to build a boat, but a bigger one this time. But this time we don't want two of every animal, I just want fish. And not just any fish, I want carp. Just carp. In aquariums, goldfish bowls, I don't care. There's a flood coming, I just want you to say carp. And I want you to make it a big boat, 3 or 4 stories high. And I said, I understand, God. You want me to build a multi-story car park. Car park, yes. You see, now that's my fault. I tell terrible jokes. Well, that's who I am. I've opened the door of my heart to myself. So with all of your faults, that's how you can love yourself, with all of your imperfections. You can only really find love, real love, in the difficult places. Because the difficult places is real life. If you want a partner in life, a real person is an imperfect person. So if you want to find love, you have to find love with an imperfect husband, with an imperfect wife, with imperfect children, with imperfect you, in an imperfect world. You can do that. And that's how you find peace, which is the highest form of love. At peace with yourself and at peace with the world. Thank you for listening.
Very good. Datu Victorine never mentioned that those images have been blessed. So I blessed them yesterday. So that's such a lovely price. It's almost a steal. It's almost breaking your precepts to buy it for the prices which were mentioned there. So please be generous. It's all for a good cause. And especially bless Buddha statues. Okay. Oh, so getting through some of the questions. How long have I been coming to the BGF for now? How many years? It's a long time, but it's very nice. It's very wonderful having a centre which is open to all the different traditions. Which, in other words, the teachers you select, the pool of teachers you can select is much wider. So you get the creme de la creme of the teachers from all the different different traditions. And that's why it's a wonderful place to come. And it also means that you can associate and build harmony together with everybody, which is most important, because sometimes I think that when there are so many different traditions and they don't really talk to each other, that's not a very good thing for Buddhism. But anyway, here comes the first question after lunch. If you are caught in a bet of two persons who are very close to you, or in between, if you are caught in between two people who are very close to you and they are having conflict, how would you resolve the following? Oh, okay. 1. All three persons need to do some important things together. 2. How to help reconcile the conflicts between these two persons. So how to help a person who is suffering dementia or going to suffer this illness. The person is holding on to the past, swoon, so strong and cannot let go. What to do? Well, a lot of questions here, okay. Number 2, you're caught in between two people who are very, very close to you. And in order to try and solve those problems, again, having a bit of kindness is always really, really helpful. In other words, if you can see the good qualities in one of those people, and you can see the good qualities in the other person, and you talk to the first person about the other's good qualities and the other person about that first person's good qualities, then maybe they can recognize those qualities in themselves. So again, this happens to me because sometimes people come from marriage counseling, and sometimes they're sitting in a table and I'm sitting opposite them. I'm looking at them, I'm looking at him, I'm looking at her. The two of them never look at each other. So sometimes they're getting some bad feelings towards one another. But when I start talking to people doing marriage counseling, I try and not just to talk about the faults and the difficulties in their marriage, but talk about the good qualities. Why did you choose that person in the first place? Why did you fall in love with them? What did you like about that person in the past? And that can sometimes help. And a good example of that is this story, another of my stories. This happened at a funeral service in the United States, apparently, a long time ago. It was at a funeral service in the West. I'm not sure if you do this in Malaysia, but it's a wonderful part of a funeral service. Relations or friends come up and they say a few words about the person who's died. It's called eulogies. So, for example, say I died, and then Victor will come up and say something about me, and Life Ping will come up and say, all my friends will come up and say something nice about me. And it's the personal memories you've had with that individual who's passed away. It's called the eulogies. And at this funeral, this man had died, he was very old, and his widow, his wife, came up and was saying something about his life and what a wonderful time they had together. But she said one of the remarkable things about her husband was this piece of paper he kept in his wallet at all times, which he'd got before he met his wife. And the husband had told his widow how that piece of paper came about. What had actually happened was this. He was at school, and in the school, it was a boys' school, there was an argument in the class. And there was two parties there, and they were getting very angry and violent at each other. And the teacher told them, "Sit down." And they said, "Tear out a sheet of paper from one of the exercise books." And they had to do this. Draw a line vertically down the middle. On the top, put a name of the person you hate the most in this class. Your enemy, the guy who just really upsets you. So they put that name on the top. Now, on the left-hand side of that line, please write why you don't like them. And they filled that column up very quickly. And when they finished, the teacher ordered them, on the right-hand side, please write down something you respect and like about that person. And of course that took much longer to do. But they had to do it. And when they put something or a few things they liked in that person, the teacher said, now fold that piece of paper down the middle along the line and carefully tear it in two. But I'm going to come with the trash can, with the rubbish basket, to collect all the pieces on the left-hand side, all the things you don't like about that person. And she collected the left-hand side of the pieces of paper. Now, she said, the right-hand side, with the things you like about your enemy, go and give it to them, personally. And she said this piece of paper was the piece of paper which her husband had received from his enemy at school, showing the things which his enemy respected and liked about him. He said he kept that throughout his whole life, because whenever he got upset about someone, he'd realize that when someone had got upset about him, they could still see some redeeming good features in them. And so when he got upset at someone else, he always remembered, got a piece of paper out, to see something wonderful and good about the person he was getting upset at. And apparently, because this was a funeral service, and because many old friends also attended, about 3 or 4 other elderly gentlemen also stood up and waved their pieces of paper, which they had also kept throughout their whole life. It would be a wonderful thing, the tool which you use in something like marriage counselling, to do that, to sit the two people down, sheet of paper, tear it in half, or no, draw a line down the centre, on the left hand all the things which you don't like about your partner, on the right hand all the things you like about them. Tear it down the middle, throw away the things you don't like, and hand to your partner the things you like and respect about them. And then you find it's just so hard to get so angry and upset and so sure that your anger is justified. It's so sure that that person you married is not really worth anything. So if people are having a conflict, it's always because they just focus on the causes of the conflict, the things which separate them. If they could only sit down and focus by a little method like that on the things which they respect about one another. And it's just too hard to maintain such a conflict. That's one practical way of resolving the conflict, by focusing, or getting those two people to focus on what they respect about each other. And that helps reconcile. Because whenever there's a conflict, it's always the case we think that person doesn't deserve to have me as their partner. That person doesn't deserve me to forgive them. That we just can't live together. We're opposites. Men are born on Mars. Women come from Venus. That's not right. We all come from planet Earth. So we are the same race, the same, whatever it is, humanity. So when we see what we have in common, that's when we can reconcile conflicts. And the other story to how we reconcile conflicts is that, look, we're in this world together. It doesn't matter whether you're Malaysian, Singaporean, Thai, Australian, whether you're girl or boy or gay or whatever, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Buddhist, you're Christian, Hindu, or whatever. We are living in this planet Earth, and we have to work together. And that particular story, which is very relevant in today's world, was the story of a friend of mine who was from Canada, and they were working in Western Australia as an engineer in the mines in the northwest. They were on a contract for 2 years. When the contract finished, they had to go home to Canada, to Toronto, where they still live. She still keeps in touch with me. So instead of flying back to Canada, they had this great idea. They were a young couple, the late 20s. They hadn't got any kids yet. So instead of flying back, let's have an adventure. They sold their house, which they had bought, and bought a boat so they could sail back from Perth to Vancouver. The idea being, once they reached Canada, they could sell their boat and they get the money back to actually for the deposit for the next house. It made economic sense, and it was also a great adventure. Young people sailing across the Pacific Islands, a wonderful adventure to have. But they needed some help, so they found two friends who were going back to Canada, and so the four of them crewed this small yacht, having an adventure of a lifetime. They reached Canada safely, but when she reached there, she sent me a letter with this story, and I use this story very often as part of opening the door of your heart. Because what happened in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, just a long way from anywhere, the engine in their boat stopped working, and they were becalmed. And the two men had to go into the engine compartment to try and fix up the problem. While the two women, they didn't know anything about engines, so they're just on deck chairs reading magazines, having a good time. But imagine two men trying to fix up an engine. They couldn't find the problem, so they started getting irritated at each other. It's your fault. We don't know what you're talking about. It started off just with a few unkind words, and then the argument grew. And it grew until they started swearing at each other. And it got so bad that one of the men was so upset, the conflict was so bad, he threw his wrench on the floor and said, "Right, that's it, I'm leaving." And that's what he said. Now this is how mad it is when you're in conflict. He was so mad that he went back to his room, he changed into his best clothes, packed his bags, and appeared on the deck carrying his baggage. And the girl told me that her and her friend almost fell off the boat laughing because there was nowhere to go. There was ocean all around as far as you could see. And so this man who wanted to leave realized he couldn't leave. So there's only one alternative. Red in the face through embarrassment, he turned around, went back to his cabin, changed back into his work clothes, and went back into the engine compartment to help fix the problem. There was no other choice. And they did fix the problem. And of course that little conflict was over, and they reached the destination in Vancouver, the best of friends. And that's a wonderful story because it shows whether it's in marriage or in the office or anywhere else, or in life, country between country. When we realize there's no alternative, when we realize there's no place to run, it's as if this planet Earth is surrounded by the ocean of space in all directions. There's no place we can go. Then you find you can always work out the problem. You can always solve the conflict if you know there's no other alternative. And that's sometimes what you tell a husband and wife. If you really want to, you can. And you will. But running away means it doesn't get solved. So sometimes in a conflict, put them together, we have to work it out, and we can. And even on the political scale, I will never forget one of the ex-prime ministers of Thailand, Dr. Sanya Thammasat, who told me personally, he was a prime minister for 1 year in Thailand. And he once told me, he said, "There's no problem which I cannot solve in politics just by going to my adversary, who we're having a conflict with, going to him personally, just the two of us, putting my hand on his knee, which is an Asian symbol, gesture of friendship. You don't do that in Australia because that's a symbol you're gay. But you put your hand on your friend's knee to show your friendship and just talking it out, just the two of you." He said there was never a problem I couldn't solve with metta, with kindness, and just with a dedication to solving that problem. So that's how we can solve those conflicts, by saying that there's no other choice, we have to reconcile, we have to find some middle ground. And doing that little seeing the good in another person helps. You realize that they're worth reconciling with. And how to help a person who's suffering from dementia or going to suffer this illness. I think I mentioned earlier, or was it last night, I went to visit my mother last October in England, a rushed visit. So I heard from my brother that she had dementia and it was getting worse. And I rushed back to see if I could see her before the windows of her past totally closed and she wouldn't recognize me. Unfortunately, I was too late. She can't recognize me now. As far as myself and my brother were concerned, she does not know us from the cleaners. So her mind is closed. So, how do you help a person like that? I was told, and this story makes so much sense, because people said it was a waste of time visiting your mother when you don't remember her, or when she doesn't remember you. And I was told there was one man in England who would visit his mother every day in the morning before work, even though her dementia was so bad also that she could not recognize her son. And one day the doctor took this man aside and said, "Look, you're wasting your time. Your mother doesn't remember you visited this morning in the afternoon. She doesn't know who you are. You could just visit maybe once a fortnight or once a month, because she doesn't know. She doesn't know who you are." And the man replied, "That's true. My mother does not know who I am, but I know who she is. That's why I visit every morning." When I heard that, I said, that's exactly what it's like when you have someone with dementia. My mother doesn't know who I am, but I know who she is. That's why I care. Now remember that. And how can I help a person? There's nothing I can do with the mind, but just to make sure that she's well looked after, or he's well looked after. All the physical needs are there. Beyond that, you can't do very much. And the best way to prevent a person getting dementia, it's one of those problems which is increasing in our world, and it's not just in the Western world. I'm sure that's happening over here in Malaysia as well. I remember this story of this man who went to see the doctor, and the doctor said, we found out you've got 2 diseases. He said, "Oh my goodness, what are those?" He said, "You've got cancer." And he said, "Oh my goodness, not cancer. What's the second disease?" "You've got dementia." "Oh, at least I haven't got cancer. That's not so bad." That's a joke. So, one of the great ways of overcoming the possibility of dementia, I'm not sure if this is proved by science, but it makes a lot of sense to me as a meditator, is actually to develop your mind in meditation. Because when you get a strong mind, I'm pretty sure, pretty confident, that that will protect you from dementia. As far as the Buddha was concerned, that mindfulness, which is developed in meditation, is also the same word for memory in Buddhism. So a person with strong mindfulness or strong sati also has a very, very good memory. So if you develop your meditation, then I think that's really going to help you not developing dementia. And the person is holding onto the past wound so strong and cannot let go, what would you do? Okay, if they really are holding on to the past, it's, sometimes that they need just the right time and the right place, the right moment when they can really let go. Because sometimes they have to do it in their own time. Again, as I said this morning, to let them know that they can let go, it's worth letting go, and maybe one day they'll make that jump and just let go. Not worth eating themselves up over this. They're only allowing the other person to hurt them again and again and again. Putting it that way, they realize they're being quite stupid, getting upset and angry, and allowing that person to hurt them again and again and again. As soon as you let it go, then they stop hurting. Oh, what's another? This is a good story. This, I think, was told to me by a marriage counsellor in Singapore. A woman came to see her. She'd had it up to here with her husband. Her husband was coming home late. She didn't know from where, but she suspected he was visiting other women. And she wanted to get divorced. So she went to see the marriage counsellor to ask for advice. And the marriage counsellor was a very smart Buddhist girl. She said, "Well, look, let me put it straightly to you. If you get divorced right now, your husband will be very happy to get rid of you. Is that what you want? I said, no, 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 no. He said, well, if you don't want your husband to be happy, try this plan. He said, go to the beauty salon and get a makeover. Start wearing some sexy clothes. Wear some perfume and be really nice and kind to your husband. Because the plan is this. See if you can make him fall in love with you again. And then when he falls in love with you again, then divorce him. I said, yeah, good idea. So that was their plan. So she spent quite a bit of money just getting a nice hairdo, getting sort of her teeth fixed or whatever, and some Botox to get rid of the wrinkles. I don't know what you girls do, but anyway, she did it all. And it was working. She'd go to see the counsellor every week. How's it go? He's coming back home earlier. And he's giving me presents. And he's being really nice to me. And this was going on, and after 3 or 4 months, the girl stopped coming to the appointments. So the counsellor had to ring her up. Said, why have you missed the last 2 or 3 appointments? What's happening? He said, oh, he's fallen in love with me again now. He comes home early. Great, she said. Now's the time to divorce him. Oh no, he's so nice now. And that was the plan all along. So that's actually good negative psychology, to get the relationship together again, to get the people to work to build up the relationships. Because relationships don't just happen. You have to work on it. And of course the relationship was dead because no one was working. By trying to get the wife to do the work, to build up the relationship again, because she thought she was doing it to hurt the guy. But when he started to love her again, it was just too nice. So no, I'm not going to hurt him. I'm not going to hurt myself. That's how they got back together again. Brilliant. So anyway, that's one way. But now you know that trick, it won't work anymore. How do we learn to trust again in a relationship where one partner has cheated on another, knowing that it may still happen again? Okay, so you can actually get these little bracelets, GPS tracking, so you can put that around your husband so you can know where he always is. Much cheaper than the PI. Now that sometimes, and again, this is my own experience with couples, sometimes it's not these days even just the husband, the wife sometimes cheats these days. It does take 2 to tango. And so sometimes the wife cheats, most time it's the man who cheats, but when they start doing that, if he really, really, really is serious and says, look, I made a mistake, forgive him. It really is worthwhile in practice. Because a lot of times that men get crazy. You know what they always say, when the blood goes between the legs, it's not in the brain anymore, so they don't do stupid things. Because love is mad and blind. So sometimes men are like that, especially. But the thing with men is they always think they can get away with it. They always think the wife doesn't find out. She always does. Always. And for those people who say, no, I've been having an affair, my wife doesn't know about it. She does know about it, but she hasn't told you yet. Because sometimes that's what wives do, they sometimes hide it, but they know. So don't think that you can get away with this. The wives know. And just think what you're doing, especially for your children. When they find out that father has been cheating on their mother. And that devastates the kids. You are trying to bring up good children. Children with virtue and respect, when you're not respecting and being virtuous towards your wife. Is that the sort of person you want to be? An example you're going to set your kids? I'm being quite tough on this, but it's important. So, especially if you're a Buddhist, or it should be anybody, please be careful. If you make that marriage vow, keep it. Oh, it's tough sometimes. Sometimes you do start falling in love with somebody else, but you say, no, I've already got a wife. I've already got a husband. And that's the one I've chosen, that's the one I'm going to work with and commit to. You lose out on a lot of excitement when you don't have affairs. And you gain on a lot of trust, a lot of companionship, and you end your life feeling that you've done a remarkable good job of being faithful. It is worth it to be faithful, to say no. So if any of you have that problem, number one, if your husband, if your wife comes to confess, don't get angry at them. If they get angry at them and start blaming them, then they don't want to confess anymore. How many people, and this is remarkably common, they want to confess to their partner that they've had a lapse, but they're afraid. They're afraid of what their partner might say, so they keep hiding it. And again, that's not a very good relationship. So please have a trust in your relationship. If one of you has made a mistake, please be strong enough to listen to that mistake. And if your partner is really confessing it, it shows they do respect you, but they were weak. Forgive them. Don't get angry and upset. And the second thing, look, how can we work out strategies that this never happens again? You've really hurt me. So obviously, because you've told me this, you obviously want the relationship to continue. How can we work together to make this relationship work? Even little things, right? Going out together again. Going to romantic dinners or movies or something. Just so you can rekindle that romance. Being kind to each other, finding out what each other like. Whatever it is, just to do a little bit more work to get that relationship back on track. And get your partner, as soon as they start feeling they like someone, say in the office, please tell me straight away, partner. So at least I know. And so maybe we can talk to your boss, or maybe we can move you to another office or somewhere, so you don't sort of meet that person. If they're sending you emails, let's get another email account. Change the telephone number or something. It's not that hard to stop a relationship if you really want to. So it can be done. So please, if your partner comes up to you and confesses, try not to get angry, because it means they'll never confess again. They will never open up to you because they're too afraid of punishment. So that's one thing we can do, with these relationships. And when I said the man with 4 wives this morning, that was not sort of in real life. That was just a symbol, like a metaphor. The man with 4 wives. Okay, we'll go quickly through these, otherwise I'll never finish them. Here we go. Do we need to repeat taking the 5 precepts every day? Only if you break the 5 precepts every day do you need to keep taking them. So no, you take them once, and that's enough. Do you need to get married every day? With your wife, just go through the ceremony every day? No. When you die, do you need to do a funeral every day for the corpse? No, only once is enough, as long as you do it well. However, be careful. I'm not sure if I told you, but there are some people these days, I'm not sure in Malaysia, but this is very common these days in Sri Lanka. You know the 8 precepts? I found out about the 13 precepts. You know what the 13 precepts are? People who keep 8 precepts in the morning and 5 precepts in the afternoon. If you think about it, that's called the 13 precepts. And that's not really keeping any precepts. So just do it once and have done with it. And every time you take the 5 precepts, how long does this last? Gee, just one whole lifetime. That's how long it lasts. So you don't have to do it in Pali. You don't have to say Parnati Pata Veramani. Just say, I undertake the 5 precepts. That's enough, as long as you know what you're doing. Dear Ajahn, parpancha or proliferation is the cause of our quarrel that leads to our unhappiness. Is our view ideology that moves us in samsara? Please explain, thank you. Oh, proliferation, because sometimes it happens, especially in marriage. Sometimes, your wife is working late because there's a lot of business in her office, and you think, why is she working late? When she comes back, she's not interested in me. And you think, she's not interested in me. It must mean she's got somebody else she's interested in. Not just interested in me, she always has these headaches and headaches and headaches. That must be someone else she's sleeping with. There must be something wrong. In fact, I read this story the other day, that your marriage is off to a bad start when as soon as the marriage ceremony is finished and the priest says, you may now kiss your bride, the bride says, not now, I've got a headache. So whatever, anyway. So proliferation so that's just too much thinking. And you just keep thinking and thinking and thinking in such a way you move further and further away from the truth. So be careful of your dubious mind. So instead of that, we can just ask our partner. And instead of having a quote, a good example of this, a very famous story about quarrels. There were two sisters, and they were arguing over an orange. It's my turn for the orange. No, said her sister. You had it last time. I had it last time. She said you had it last time, now it's my turn. No, she said you had it last time, it's my turn. But you had 2 oranges before, therefore I should have 2 oranges this time. Having an argument like this. So, because they weren't listening to one another, they were arguing. They decided to have a compromise. They cut the orange in half. And after they cut the orange in half, the first sister took her orange, she peeled off the outside, threw it in the trash can, and ate the flesh. The second woman peeled her orange, threw the flesh in the trash can, because she wanted to peel for a cake. If only they'd asked each other what you needed the orange for, there'd be no argument. One could have the whole flesh, the other one would have the whole peel, and they'd both be happy. And so many arguments are like that. So when you argue about things, what do you really want? And when we find out what we really want, there's always a compromise possible. And that's one of the first rules of conflict management. Find out what people really, really want. When we find out what they really, really want, not just how they express what they want, what they really, really want, it's always a way of getting a compromise there. And a lot of times, both people get satisfied. It's win-win all the time. Ajahn, thank you for your enlightening talk. My question is, how does transference of merits works? How does one confirm if the merits are properly transferred or received? We know when you send an email, if it bounces back, it's got the message on there, I'm sorry, but your email has permanently failed. So if you get sort of a very good mind, sometimes the email gets back into your mind, sorry, the merits have not been transferred. But does not matter. How do the merits get transferred? This is mostly the way it gets transferred. I think many of you know, you may have had this experience, especially in Malaysia here. Many of your children go and study and live overseas. Maybe in Australia, maybe in Europe, England, New York, California. Many of you may have children overseas right now. Suppose there was an accident and your child was maybe in a car crash. You would know right now in this hall that something was wrong. Because parents and children, people we really love and very close to, there is some sort of connection there. You know what's happened. One of the anecdotes which I tell, which appeared in the Melbourne Age, was of a vet, a young man, a veterinary surgeon. On a Friday afternoon, he'd finished work and he was travelling from Melbourne into the countryside for a week-long party, like a weekend party with his friends. He'd been looking forward to this all week, so he's driving along, finished work for the week, in a really good mood. Halfway on the journey, inexplicably, he was overcome with strong emotions. He started crying. And it was so strong, he had to pull into the emergency lane to stop because he just couldn't drive like this. And he was weeping and crying and felt terrible. And he had no idea why. It just came out of the blue. And he had to stay there for about 15 or 20 minutes to get himself together again, even though he was still very, very sensitive and fragile. he thought he was well enough now to drive. So he continued driving. He reached the country house where the party was going to be held. And that's where the message was waiting for him. At precisely the time he'd been overcome with emotion, his pet dog had been hit by a car and killed. There's no way of him knowing that. But nevertheless, the very moment his dog in the city was hit and killed by a car, maybe 100 kilometers away, he was overcome by this terrible, strong emotion. He was connected to that dog. In the same way that you're connected to your children to your parents. You know that something's wrong. You have to go and ring them because you know that they're not right. So, if you are transferring merits, if you really think and focus, say, on your father, your mother, your grandparent, who you love very, very much, they know that you're thinking about them. The same reason why you connect in this life is that same process by which you connect from this life to the next. They will know that you're doing something good in their name. They will, instead of being upset, they'll be just so overjoyed that their children are still remembering them and they're doing something good in their name. They're doing some great good karma. They'll be so overjoyed that they get that joy. They get that inspiration. And that is the most powerful way that merits are transferred. It works on the same principle, the connection between loved ones. So that's how you can transfer merits and how they're received. If they're not received, it doesn't matter. You've been thinking and caring about an ancestor without whom you wouldn't be where you are today. It's gratitude. It's a beautiful thing to always remember your ancestors. Is there such a thing as divine retribution? Should mortal sinners expect to get their just deserts in the afterlife? Oh, you're going to be in big trouble. Oh, no. There is no such thing as revenge in Buddhism. As one of the things was, as an English boy reading Buddhism, I was just so inspired to see that Buddhism doesn't have punishment. Instead, we have forgiveness and trying to find some strategies to make sure it doesn't happen again. Punishment and violence just makes more ill will. An example of this. I'm an abbot of a monastery. I have to train the people who come into robes. So one day there was this trainee wearing white who came to confess his crime. He was supposed to be keeping 8 precepts, one of which is you're not allowed to eat in the afternoon. Nothing solid, just like monks. And he told me the afternoon before he was hungry. He went into the kitchen and made himself a sandwich and ate it without telling anybody. He said, I've broken my precepts. He said, I'm terrible. And I said, no, that's fine. Now you've told me, fine, you can go now. And he was, what? You're not going to punish me? He said, no, we don't do punishment in Buddhism. Just, make sure that you eat more for lunch. So you don't get so hungry in the afternoon. You can have some chocolate or something in the afternoon, have a cup of tea with sugar, whatever you want, or honey, but try to eat more so you don't feel hungry. That's it. You can go. And he told me, he said, that's not going to work for me. He said, if you don't punish me, I'll probably do the same tomorrow. So he was challenging me. So I had to very quickly think of an appropriate punishment for this young man. And as it happened, that day I was reading a book about Australian history. And I think many of you know that Australia was a British colony where the British sent all their convicts. And they were very cruel to those convicts. If they broke any rule, they were actually whipped, and the instrument used was called the cat of nine tails. And it was brutal. But I've just been reading that. And when this young Australian man said he wanted a punishment for eating in the afternoon, I remembered what it said in that book, and I said, okay, I will give you a traditional Australian punishment. I will give you 50 strokes of the cat. And this poor man, he's wearing white clothes. His face went whiter than the clothes he was wearing. Because he'd only just joined a monastery. You think, oh my goodness, you get whipped for doing, I shouldn't have joined this place. I shouldn't have confessed. I'm going to get flogged. And then I had to explain to him what 50 strokes of the cat mean in a Buddhist monastery. We've got 2 cats. Find one of them and stroke them. 1, 2, 3. That's called 50 strokes of the cat. To learn some compassion and kindness. Because that was his mistake. He was so unkind, he always thought that when you make a mistake, you need to be punished. Kindness works in another way. If you make a mistake, be kind, because we all make mistakes. He was hungry. Now, that's not worth punishing for, but try and find out why you did that. You are hungry, so eat more, so you don't need to do that, so you can keep your precepts. It's all voluntary. So that's how we actually look at punishment in Buddhism. We don't have it at all. So if that's how monks and the Buddha behave, how can there be divine retribution? Isn't sort of, these heavenly beings, aren't they supposed to be high-minded beings? How can a heavenly being punish anybody? Heavenly beings will say, oh, never mind, you'll be okay. We all make mistakes, okay, just go and find a cat and stroke it 50 times. So now that is really what happens. But a lot of people find it difficult to forgive. They can't forgive other people, and more importantly, they can't forgive themselves. That is our biggest problem. If you've done something wrong, if you've made a mistake, you are of the opinion you deserve to be punished. And so, some people who have misbehaved and got into guilt, they can't even have a successful relationship. Happiness is there for them, but they won't take it. They will destroy their relationship because they think they don't deserve to be happy and successful. That's one of the psychological underpinnings for broken relationships. You may be with a man who's a great man, but he keeps messing around with the relationship. You could dig deep and you find that he thinks he doesn't deserve to be happy. Subconsciously, he destroys the relationship. I've seen this many, many times. People have done something wrong and they haven't forgiven themselves yet. So they seek for pain, they seek for punishment. And if that is there with you when you die, then you will seek for punishment in some lower realm. The only reason why, because you feel you deserve it. There is such things as hell realms, but you make your own hell realm to suit yourself. You will punish yourself accordingly as you think you deserve. No being will send you down to a hell realm. And those hell realms, if you read the Buddhist sutras, they are mind-made. They're not God-made. They're not some places which are always there waiting for you. You make them, and you stay as long as you think you deserve. And the gates of hell are always open. You can walk out at any time. And the key is always compassion, to forgive yourself, to let the past go. And then you can walk out. Unfortunately, people find it too hard to forgive. That's why, like monks like me, other monks and nuns who come here, teachers, trainers, come to the BGF. This is actually where we learn Buddhist great forgiveness, BGF. Because when you have great forgiveness like this is actually where you cut off all of this guilt and anger, and you can live happy lives in. People who've forgiven their past make great partners in life. They accept happiness when it comes. And they allow themselves to be happy, to have a wonderful time in life.
Thank you, Ajahn, for being here. It is a joy listening to you. Your talks have taught us so much. Thank you. That's just fan mail. I'll take that back with me. How do you explain the karma of Haiti people? Do they all have the same karma? I think I answered that this morning. It's just this is what happens, when you get born in a certain place. So where I live, we don't have the possibility of earthquakes. We have the possibility of bushfires, just like in the bushfires in Victoria. That is our danger. That could happen any time. So we're prepared for that in case there is a big bushfire. But we don't have possibility of tsunamis. In fact, because we're up on a mountain, well, not a mountain, it's on a hill. When we have global warming, it means the sea will actually rise and actually be at the bottom of our monastery, so we could actually really turn it into a resort. So we've got really sort of good land there, which is worth a lot of money once we get global warming. About letting go. When you start to let go of suffering, when you have not had closure to the problem, for example, those people have to deal with a missing child or a missing pet. It's easy if death serves the closure. But when do you let go in this situation? Do you let go of hope? It is sometimes let go, not of like hope. You always wish that child or that pet to be happy, to be well, maybe to have a very good home somewhere or other. But you should realize that your pet or your child is not yours. And any mother should know this. When your child came out of your womb, maybe you were under anesthetic when the birth happened, but those first few moments when you got to know your new child, it's not you, it's not your husband. This is another being with history. It's a person with personality. You can feel that, you can know that. You know, where has this being come from? I'm its mother, I know its father, but it's not either of us. It's a separate entity, a being. It's come into our life, who knows from where. We don't know how long it will be visiting us, but it's not ours. It's just put into our care. For 18, 20, 25 years we look after it, and then we send it out into the world. We are like gardeners looking after a plant. We don't own the plant, we have to care for it. And please have a good way of looking at your children, because some parents are so overly controlling of their kids. They cause so much suffering to their children, always telling them what to do and when to do. Please remember the wisdom of the bird. The birds, when they have eggs, they sit on those eggs for days. And if you think you're getting a sore bottom sitting on the chair, think what it's like being a bird on those round, hard eggs. And when the birds are hatched, they spend hours just feeding those chicks. Their mouths are always open. If you feel how hard you have to work to pay off your kids' education, to feed them and get them iPods and video games, imagine what it's like being a chicken, like a bird. Always got their mouths open, these little birds. And then they teach them how to fly. But once they can fly, that's it. Bye-bye, kids, we're off. And that's a wonderful thing. Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing? Once your kids have got the degree, okay, bye-bye, kids. You can get out now. Now, fortunately, sometimes we feel we own our children for the whole of our lives. We don't let them go soon enough. Which is one of the reasons why that some of the children, they might come back for Chinese New Year, but they don't come back at other times. So remember, if you always let your child go and give them that freedom, they will love you so much, they will come back more often. So please give kids freedom. So if there's a missing child or a missing pet, you don't know where they are, have had not closure. This idea of closure, sometimes there's never even closure. Even if you find that they have been killed or had an accident, still that's not closure. People think that's closure, they have to know. But what it means is the type of pain changes from just trying to find that being to try and deal with the fact they're not going to be here anymore. So it's a different type. Even in grief, the only closure is when we let the person go and we move on with our life. So that
if you have got a missing child, you just wish them well wherever they are in this world. I hope you're still alive and having a wonderful time and being careful. I've tried my best, that's all I can do. If you've got a missing dog or cat, maybe someone's looking after them. They're having a wonderful time. I think maybe some of you know that great cat in Brickfield's temple. I don't know if it's still alive. Who ran into Brickfield's temple, and as soon as it ran in, no one knows where it came from. And it went straight into the Dharma hall and got up on its hind legs with its paws looking up to the Buddha. And I've got a picture of that somewhere back in Australia. And of course, as soon as that cat did that, praying to the Buddha, that cat had a meal ticket for the rest of its life. A very smart cat. So sometimes our pets do disappear, but that's okay. They'll find a nice home somewhere. So you have to let them go. That's the only closure. If they're missing or they're dead, it's pretty much the same. Does the suppression of the 5 hindrances equal the jhanas? A monk mentioned once in a sutta somewhere, suppression of 5 hindrances comes before the jhanas. Is that so? Yeah, this is just a meditation question. The jhanas are these deep states of meditation, very wonderful, very powerful, very useful. This is when the 5 hindrances which stop you seeing things as they truly are vanish for a while. So they are suppressed before the jhanas, that's one of the important requisites, and they stay suppressed after the jhanas, which means you have this huge opportunity for insight. And my neighbour's dogs, it's amazing, just these 2 questions, one of the high question about jhanas and hindrances, and the other side of the question, my neighbour's dog shit stinks out the whole house all day. It's amazing, on the same piece of paper. Once on jhanas, if you get jhanas, the dog doesn't stink anymore. The shit doesn't stink. It's true. Because when you've got a very powerful mind, everything is very beautiful. Now, I usually mention this story on retreats, but it's actually true. When you get into deep meditation, your mind gets so powerful. It's one of the signs. If you go outside and look at the flowers look more beautiful than ever before. The yellows are just so deep. The greens are just so vivid, like they're fluorescent. You're not going crazy. All it is the meditation is cleaning up the senses, so you're seeing with power now. And everything you look at is beautiful. This happened to me once. I just had a wonderful meditation, and everything in the whole jhana grove, the monastery was looking so beautiful, but I had to go to the toilet. And after going to the toilet, I just happened to look in the bowl. Think, wow, look at that. That's absolutely beautiful. Oh, it's so fragrant. And just the different colours of brown and the way it's just all formed together and just a little bit of shiny on the outside. That's a work of art. Maybe I shouldn't flush that away. Now, you may find that funny, but that was actually true. I did flush it away, though. Let it go. But, this is what dog's shit is like. It does stink. That's its nature. But your neighbour's dog shit stinks out the house, the whole house, all day. He refuses to clean the shit all the time. What do I do? Deodorant. Spray the shit with sort of deodorant. Would that work? I don't know. But I don't know where you are, actually, because in houses, aren't there you live in separate houses? Do you actually smell the dog shit in the house from next door? It's really, really weird. But anyway, if the neighbour's dog shit stinks out the whole house all day, and he refuses to clean the shit all the time, what do I do? Is close the windows, have aircon, put filters up, and if nothing else works, remember, just call it Ajahn dog shit, and just learn just how that life is sometimes very difficult, and if that's the worst problem you have in your life, then it's not that bad. You can light a lot of incense. I don't know, what other things can you do? Wear a gas mask. I don't know if you can call anyone in to fix it up. In our streets, our people don't carry guns. In our schools, our students don't carry knives. Yet in our houses, we live behind bars and guards. How then can we practice fearlessness? This is a big problem now because I think it was in Australia recently. There was I think in Melbourne, a kid got killed in an attack with knife. I think was it 10 or 11-year-old child had a fight in the school ground, and one of the kids pulled a knife and killed him. And I think that's the first time that's happened in Australia. And I think the knife crime, it's like a sort of in thing in many sort of European countries, United States. Kids carry knives to school. And hopefully that the kids here in Malaysia don't follow that. It's unfortunate that sometimes when they hear about it in one country, they do the same in other countries. But in our houses, we live behind bars and guards. How then can we practice fearlessness? You look, what's the cause of the violence? Many people look for the cause of the violence in young people. There is a lot of testosterone-generated violence. That's just young men being young men. But obviously, it needs to be channeled into safer areas, especially with sports. It's a great way of young men sort of competing, which is part of the genetic code of the male to compete in such a way, and to sort of get that testosterone channeled in more positive areas. But it is a shame that we have life behind bars and guards, in our modern society. And so how can we overcome that? Unfortunately, I think it's probably the same in Malaysia. It certainly is in Australia that the other half, not the half, maybe 80-90% of violence comes from drug-induced violence. Otherwise, people trying to find drugs, or people actually under the influence of drugs. And of course, even in Malaysia, there's a death penalty for people with drugs, but there's still many drugs come into this country. Corruption is one of the biggest problems. We all know that. So I think that, as a society, we should be even less intolerant of corruption than we are now. So please don't tolerate any corruption in any area of life, because that corruption would also lead to other aspects in society, like having drugs in our communities. And we take away the drugs, and we try and sort of ban them or find a way of discouraging them. We have groups like the youth groups, for our Buddhist children, so they realize they don't need to take drugs. And then maybe we can take away the bars, and we don't need to live behind such bars. It's also that sometimes that people have got no hope. Sometimes people who are very poor, when they have got no hope, they think that's the only thing they can do to get a meal or to get a life is to steal. So it's great also to have charities, to have places where we do look after the more underprivileged members of our societies, to give people even in the poorest strata of societies, as they say, a hope, a path to be able to go forward in life. That takes a lot of money, that takes a lot of our taxes. We know it's much better to pay those taxes to the government for programs to help our youth than to have insurance and bars on our windows and lessen the quality of our life. I think you may all remember, I remember, times in my youth where you didn't need to have locked doors, you didn't need to have bars on the windows, you knew your friends, you knew your neighbours, and the chances of getting robbed was just so low. These days, times have changed. And what have we lost? I think most scientists know that where there's great disparities of wealth, there you have most of the social problems. When it's very, very rich and very, very poor. That's why, as communities, we should make sure that there's plenty of safety nets for the poor, giving opportunities to sort of better themselves. How does one shovel the shit in the garden day by day? With a spade. That's how one shovels the shit. Okay, you each have to find the way you deal with that in your own way. So when there is problems, you think, how am I going to deal with this? How can I learn from this? What can I do with this to make myself better and stronger? Like a good example, like personal one recently, the Bhikkhuni controversy. So when all of that sort of shit was coming in my direction, so how do you deal with that? So you deal with that by thinking, have you done a good thing? Really investigate it, make sure it's okay. Make sure that when people say bad things about you, you don't say bad things back. Just like it says, in the Dhammapada, hatred never ceases by hatred, it only ceases by love, by forgiveness. So I think, wow, this is wonderful. This is a chance for me to show that I can practice the Dhamma. So when those sorts of things happen, I realize, wow, this is another exam which the world has given me. So I relished that, to sort of test to see how I was behaving, and to make sure I always maintain my loving kindness towards any accuser whatsoever. So there was a poem which, it was Sister Sister Yifa. Remember Sister Yifa? She's been to give talks here. She sent me this from the United States. It was from an American author, which circle which shut me out. Heretic, rebel, someone to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that kept them in. So they drew a circle which kept me out, but I drew a bigger circle which kept them in. Now that's a wonderful little way to deal with a problem when you've been rejected, expelled, or people say, no, I don't like you anymore. They've drawn a circle which has put you outside. But me, you put even a bigger circle which makes them inside. So from experiences like that, I welcome them because I can grow from them, I can learn much more. And I also have more stories to give talks about. So all of the difficulties in life, this is what we mean by digging these things in, testing yourself, learning, growing from these things. So the next time it happens to you, you are stronger, wiser, and even more compassionate. And that's what we mean by digging these things in. So I said this morning, you look upon any adversity, any difficulty in your life as being your teacher. So you say, here I am, this is painful, this is difficult, this is a problem. How am I going to learn from this? How am I going to grow from this? And just with that attitude, instead of trying to get rid of it, embracing it and saying, how can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? What is this teaching me? What can I find out from this? How can I make myself a better person from this? And that's what we mean by digging in the Dhamma. Does a victim of a physical or sexual abuse need to go being abused as a sign of acceptance and paying back the past karma owed to the perpetrator? Now this is such a common thing in psychology. Someone who has been physically or sexually abused, they tend to abuse physically or sexually other people when they're in positions of control or power. Children who've been abused turn into abusers when they grow up. But they don't have to do that. Again, that's only a repressed anger, a feeling of lack of self-worth. It's a strange thing. It's common that people who have been raped or abused think they deserved it. And this is actually a very strange thing to understand, but it's so common. After a while you can get your head around it. Women who've been raped often don't report the rape because they think that somehow or other they deserve that. That is just so wrong. No one deserves such violence to them. So why do they feel that they deserved it? It's because of the culture of guilt which we've been brought up in. So we think that somehow if we experience pain, we must have contributed to that. It's somehow karmically our fault. We take on that blame. Buddhism, real spirituality, no blame. You did not deserve that. So you've been violated, you've been hurt. And people who've been raped, often this is one of the ways they describe it. It's like having your soul taken out. It's part of you who's just been destroyed forever. Something very, very intimate and personal to you. So what are you going to do about that? How we do that is build up a new soul. I'm not talking about anatta or anything. Build up new love, kind love, first of all to yourself. You didn't deserve that. Be kind to yourself and see if you can embrace that and move forward with it. How is that done? Now you learn what it's like to take away something so precious of another person. Learn what it's like so you never do anything like that to anybody else. Once you know how painful it is, you know how important it is not to repeat that hurt and pain on anybody else. My own father was not sexually abused but physically abused as a young man. I found this out when I used to ask my father about my granddad, who I never knew because he died in Liverpool before I was born. And my father would refuse to speak about his own father, my paternal grandfather. It was only later on in life I got it out of him. He said, "Come on, Dad, tell me what your dad was like. I want to know what my grandfather was like." He turned to me and he said, "Your grandfather was a bastard." That's what he said. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, he was a plumber by trade. During the Depression years in England, before the Second World War, times were really tough. Not like the credit crunch. This is nothing compared to those Great Depressions in Europe, United States in the 30s. And he said if he did make any money, he'd spend it in the pub. Come home drunk, get off his belt, and whip any child for no reason if they came in the distance of the belt. And then he was set on his wife, my father's mother, beat her. And he said, I hated my father. He was a bastard. But he also said, my dad said, that whenever he was on the end of that lashing with the belt, he always made this promise to himself. If in the future he ever had children, he'd never ever do anything like that to his own kids. He realized how much it hurt, not just physically, but deep inside. He said, I would never do that to my kids. Later on in life, he was my father. I have a brother. He just couldn't hit us. He couldn't punish us in that way. And we didn't turn out to be rotten kids because he wouldn't punish us. We respected him without the need for a cane or a strap or a belt. He learned from that violence not to give violence back to his kids. And you all know how I respect my father so much and how much I learned from him. What a great man I think he was. Part of the reason was how hard was his childhood. He dug in that shit. And he became a wonderful man. That's a personal example of what can happen. Victims of gross domestic violence. You can learn, you can dig it in. You can become an amazing person. My own father is one of those examples. Can be done. How should be the Buddhist way of looking at the 2012 end of the world? I see many people overreacting. Are they not? Sadhu. Yeah, how many people remember Y2K? It's going to be the end of the world then. 1999, according to Nostradamus. You can actually read the history of the end of the world. People have been predicting the end of the world since the time of Jesus Christ. If you read the Bible, he said the world will end in our lifetime. Before you, the disciples, have walked all over Palestine in those days, the end of the world will come. It never did. And then they thought 1000 AD. After 1,000 years, most people in Europe, they left their homes and went to the high ground, feeling that 1,000 years after the after the birth of Jesus would come the end of the world. They were all Christians. And what happened? Nothing. I think it was the Seventh-day Adventists. The end of the world was going to come about 1960 or 72 or something. And what happened? Nothing. Look, you tell all the people who think the end of the world is coming, please put your money where your mouth is. I hereby, on behalf of the BGF, put 100,000 ringgit Any takers? I bet you the world is not going to end in 2012. You put your 100,000, we'll get a lawyer. I'll put 100,000 in, you put 100,000 in, and after 2012, the winner takes all, and the interest as well. Of course you're going to win. So, a lot of people, they say these things, and it's interesting. Why do we think this? Because we like being scared. That's all. People like having fear and controlling people with fear. Because if I say, suppose I did say, the world is going to end, not in 2012, but 2010. The tiger is going to roar and is going to eat the whole world. There's going to be, already had the earthquake in Haiti. There's going to be a tsunami so big it comes right up the Klang River and just swallows up KL. There's going to be meteors from space. And it's going to end soon. So this is your last opportunity to make good karma. Please write out a check for everything you own and give it to the BTF. You won't need it next week at the end of the world. Sometimes because of fear, it's a lot of scams. It's fraud. It doesn't work. So please, no, don't be gullible. The world will not end. The only time I remember this was in one of the newspapers. Have you seen this fellow? I remember this fellow in Australia, in Perth. You'd always see him on a Sunday when we went back from our city centre to our monastery with a sign at the crossroads. The end of the world is nigh, the end of the world is nigh. He kept on having this sign with passing traffic. Because we were Buddhists and he was obviously a Christian, we waved to him and he waved back. We shout out, see you next week. The end of the world is nigh. We were cheeky. But then actually, we didn't see him for a while. We found out he had a sign, he was crossing the street and he got hit by a car. So actually he was right after all. It's a sick joke, but it was actually true. What carries better merit, donating blood or listening to a Dharma talk? Okay. It really is whether you are really listening to a Dharma talk, because sometimes that people aren't really listening. Sometimes you see this, sometimes they're looking at their clock, they've got their head down over there. But that's actually why I'd try and tell jokes, because sometimes, I know in Perth, people keep on listening because they're hanging out for the next joke. So, if you don't tell a joke every 5 or 10 minutes, they really fall asleep. They've got to keep awake because the next joke is coming soon, but they don't know when. What's my latest joke? Oh, here's a latest joke, just to wake everybody up. There was this man. It was almost the end of the world for him because he was lost in the desert. And he was crawling through the sand on his hands and knees. He had hardly any energy left. The sun was beating on his brain. He had sunstroke, heat stroke, thirsty. His energy was almost gone. He was so close to death. And he thought he'd had it when he saw something in the distance coming across the sand dunes. He said, no, this is a mirage. But he saw it, it stayed, it came closer. What is it? And through the haze he made out 4 husky dogs pulling a sled with an Eskimo on the back. And he thought, this is crazy, it's a mirage, I'm going mad. But it continued in his direction until the husky dogs were licking him. He could actually feel it. It wasn't a mirage. He was saved. And he blurted out, oh, I'm so lucky, so thankful. You've come to save me. I've been lost in the desert for days. And the Eskimo said, and you think you're lost? So that's the joke, to keep people from falling asleep while listening to a Dhamma talk. So, is it better donating blood or listening to a Dharma talk? It's if you donate blood, you may help a person for a couple of days. But if you listen to a Dharma talk, you help yourself and people for lifetimes. So it is actually much better much better listening to a Dharma talk, but it doesn't mean you don't donate blood as well. Because what you can do, go and donate blood and listen on an iPod to a Dhamma talk at the same time. Then you get double merit, you see. Ajahn, just wondering, what did you think about Pastor Rory Tan incident who insulted Buddhism and shared misconception about Buddhism? As lay people, what do we do about that and respond with wisdom? Thank you. Okay, if somebody insults you, what should you do? The Ajahn Chah used to say, if someone calls you a dog, which is very insulting in Asia, you should always look at your bottom to see if you've got a tail. If you haven't got a tail, oh, I'm not a dog. Sorry, you've got it wrong. End of problem. So that's a beautiful little simile there. So if someone insults Buddhism, what are they saying? You have a look at Buddhism, has it got a tail? No, it's not a dog, no problem. So the only reason people insult you is to try and upset you. If you refuse to get upset, if you just ignore it, then they think it's a waste of time insulting these Buddhists. They just keep on smiling and meditating. And when other people are so busy, so trying to insult and destroy, Buddhists are not wasting their time. They're keeping on building and building up their communities, building more temples and retreat centers and meditation places in the Klang Valley. So yeah, let them waste all their time doing that business. In the meantime, we'll keep on building and building and building. And growing and growing and growing. And you don't grow through putting down others. You only destroy yourself. So when we see that, we say, well, we're not going to respond in kind. Well, if you want to say that, you're wrong, that's it. But we will be peaceful. We will be kind. And we'll be keeping on fulfilling our obligations and building our communities, not through negativity, but just through positive acts of kindness, generosity and wisdom. So let's build a Buddhism not at the expense of others, but let's build a Buddhism which is always positive, inclusive, non-critical, and just moving forward rather than ever moving backwards. So that's how I would respond. You can criticize as much as you like. How to handle the fear within people, bad people who threaten your life. Was it a couple of weeks ago? No, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. One of our members in our Buddhist community in Perth. She was at home. She told me she heard this great bang, and the next thing she knew, the burglar was in her house with a hammer and a machete. Get on the floor! That's another way of doing Dharma talks. Always, increase the voice, make people a bit afraid. Get on the floor! Because it makes it exciting. So they got on the floor. But she was with her husband, but she said she didn't feel afraid. She just looked up at the burglar and said, this is verbatim, she said, we're peaceful people. And the burglar looked at her and said, I'm a peaceful person too. And then he looked around and saw all her Buddha statues. And he looked down at her and said, I'm sorry. I'm terribly, terribly sorry to have to do this. My wife is pregnant. I need the money. And she said, there's $50 in the handbag. Here's the keys to the car. And he said, thank you. And he said, I apologize. I'm so sorry for doing this. She said that he had tears in his eyes. And just before he left, he was a Christian. He said, God bless you. They got a blessing after they gave their dana. And he left. They only lost $50. Their car was found a little bit later. And she had to report it to the police. And when the police heard the conversation which had happened and how the burglar had almost cried and had apologized and given them a blessing, it was on the evening news, TV news. She was interviewed on the radio and the newspapers the next day. It was really uncommon. And why did that happen? because she's a Buddhist and she knows just how not to be afraid. And she said she was so surprised, she came up to thank me. All those teachings I've been listening to all these years, see, they actually work. Because if she'd got afraid or tried to fight the burglar, she may be dead now. As a burglar with a machete and a hammer. But because she was very calm and kind and peaceful, the burglar calmed down and was peaceful too. And in the end, it was the first time, according to the police, the burglar ever gave a blessing to their victims. The great story, which is only 3 or 4 weeks old. How does one accept a lifelong debt economically, which one does not mean to hold responsibility for? Economic debt. In other words, you borrowed some money from somebody else. I hope this is what you mean, off in the bank, and there's no way you're going to be able to pay it back. Well, you can pay it back with other ways, not with just money. Just to say, well, look, someone has really helped me. Like, for example, all of my education was from scholarships. Scholarship to a good school in West London, a scholarship to Cambridge University, and even being paid just to do a teaching course for a year. And I haven't paid the government of Britain back. Instead, I went off to Thailand, now to Australia. The UK government gave all that money and they got no return. But I realized, no, I haven't given them any money back, but I give them many, many other things back to that community, and to communities in other places. So remember, debts aren't always paid back in kind. They're paid back in kindness. Not in kind, not money for money, not house for house, not car for car, but in kindness. So if someone has helped you, never think you have to help them back. If they've given you some money and really helped you out in times of difficulty, then maybe there's another person who needs some help. You give the money to them. This is what I was taught. Ajahn Chah used to tell me, he said, whatever I've helped you at, don't say thank you back. The only way you can pay off your debt to me, said Ajahn Chah, is you go off and help other people. And if I help other people, then I've paid off my debt for Ajahn Chah helping me. And if I've helped any one of you, you don't need to say thank you or give me ang pao. Give the ang pao to somebody else. In other words, you send that goodness on. And that's actually how goodness keeps going on and on. Whatever gift I receive, I give it to someone else and tell them, don't give it back to me, give it to someone else, and give it to someone else and someone else, and it goes a long, long journey. If I give you something and you give it back to me, it hasn't gone very far, it's ended. So that's a debt. So that's the only way we pay off our debts. Chinese like to give money to monk in red packets, known as ang pao. The monk has renounced the worldly life. Is it right for a lay person to offer money to monk? Why do you want to offer money to a monk? Is it bribe? Or is it making merit? Now you know what the Buddha taught. You can look this up in things in the Dakkanavibhanga Sutta. The Buddha said that giving money, even giving a gift, even to the Buddha, does not get as much return as if you give the money to the Sangha. Said the Sangha is even higher than the Buddha. So if you went to get bang for your bucks, as they say, the greatest return from your ang pao, don't give it to a monk like me or any monk. Give it to the Sangha, give it to the temple, give it to the Jhana Grove or whatever. Give it to the BGF. Don't give it to individuals, give it to the group. The Buddha said that's where you get the most merit. Even more merit than giving to an arahat or even to the Buddha is giving to the Sangha. That's a beautiful thing, because that way it goes to the temple, and anything a monk needs, the temple will supply. So you don't need an individual money or cash. I have lived without money for 35 years. And look how far I travel. travel all over the world without any money whatsoever. Fortunately, the customs never actually checks me in Malaysia, because actually, apparently, if you're not having enough money when you come into Malaysia, they usually don't let you come in the country if you're not carrying enough dollars. That's true, actually, because somebody once told me they came in over here, then I think they had only about $500 or something. I think the limit was 1,000. They said, no, you can't come in. The next plane you had to go back again. That's one of the rules, because the idea is like tourists or people are supposed to bring money into the country. But of course, they see I'm a monk. And even the people at the airport, they always know that some monks have psychic powers, so you better not mess with a monk. But that's just... you travel all over the world with no money at all. And you do fine. No problem. So, I proved it in my life. It can be done. And other monks of our tradition have proved it too. They don't really need it. But, there are monks of different traditions. We don't want to sort of enforce and upset other monks or other nuns. But the best thing is give it to the temple rather than to the monk or the nun. That means the temple have to have a good committee too. One of the problems in places like Thailand, they have this old joke. Ask any Thai monk, he will laugh. It's committee 50%, monastery 50%. There's corruption again. And that happens in temples. So we have to try and have no corruption, so you know that all the money which you give goes to the place you intend it to go. So all the money which goes to BGF, I trust the organisation so well, it will all go into the BGF programs. People are volunteers that don't get anything from it. That's the best thing to do. To give the ang pao to the temple rather than to me. I have achieved my financial freedom. How can I achieve my spiritual rich and happiness in life at the same time? Are you really free of money? Do you look at the stock market every week, just in case? If you do, you're not financially free. I am financially free. I don't like that stock market. So how do I achieve my spiritual rich and happiness in life at the same time? Now look, it's okay to be wealthy. Because look, without wealthy people, we wouldn't have our BGF or our temples. Buddhism has always relied, from the time of Anathapindika and King Bimbisara and King Pasenadi, they always relied on wealthy people, actually to support some of the monasteries. But sometimes you ask, why are people wealthy? And according to Buddhism, the karmic cause of wealth is that you have been generous in your previous life. What that means is that you know how to use money. It hasn't just been for yourself and your family. It's been for society as well. You've been generous. So it's as if that was your test and you passed it. So now in your next life, you're given more money to use because you deserve it. You've been tested, you know how to use money. So if you are wealthy, remember you are given that wealth for a purpose. And the purpose is for your own happiness, enjoyment, that's part of it. For looking after your family, for investing in your future, but also for society as well. To be generous to the temples, the orphanages, the other charities. That's the purpose of wealth. And experiments have shown time and time again that the money you spend on charity gives you the greatest happiness back. The money you've given for a good cause, you think about it, you get more happiness from that than money you spend on yourself. Every morning, usually at breakfast, I have some cereal and some milk. Half the milk I give to the cat. And I get much more happiness feeding the cat than drinking the milk myself. I always do. And that's just obvious. Giving to others what you've got, you get much more happiness than keeping it for yourself. So, that's what charity is all about. So, if you want to achieve your spiritual richness and happiness, share your wealth out to good causes, keep your precepts, start to meditate, and then you should have lots of time. If you have got your finances in order, work less, spend more time, say, serving groups like the BGF, and doing meditation and stuff like that, and then you're actually using your wealth and your time, which wealth gives you, in the most appropriate way. Enjoy yourself as well. Go travelling if you want to do it. Have nice things, but you don't have to have expensive things. The only reason why people have expensive mansions is just to impress their friends. The only reason why you have a fast car is again to impress others. You can't drive a fast car fast. The police cameras will catch you. It's a waste of time. Ajahn Brahm, I agree with your comment last night that your problem associated with starting the Bhikkhuni order is a problem that will come to pass. But it does raise the question, who decides what is right? Who decides in a situation of wide difference of opinion how to bring Buddhism forward? Do we go back to the legacy of the first council where the direct disciples recount the original teaching? Shouldn't there be room for the growth from there? I remember a classic argument. This was in Zen Buddhism. It was about reincarnation, because they were arguing. One monk was saying, look, Buddhism is all about the present moment. We can't know the future. And what we haven't experienced ourselves yet, we must not take as truth. So he said, I haven't died yet. I don't know about reincarnation. Therefore, it can't be an essential part of Buddhism. The other monk said, no. The Buddha taught reincarnation. He remembered his past lives. He got books like the Jatakas. It's part of dependent origination. It's important. They had this argument. So having an argument, they said, let's go to the teacher to settle it. So one of them went to the teacher and they told the teacher, said, look, Buddhism teaches all about the present moment, only to rely upon our own experience. Ehipassiko. Just don't believe, just follow your own experience. Therefore, it can't be part of Buddhism. Well, the master listened to what he said and said, you're right. And so he went outside, master said I was right, nah. And the second, he can't have said you're right, I'm going to go and see him. So he went and saw him. He said, look, the Buddha remembered his past lives. It's one of the three knowledges, the Tevijja, which are important for enlightenment. Without rebirth, where's the law of karma? It doesn't work. And the whole point of this is stop getting reborn. And it's obvious, it's part of the whole samsara, the different realms of existence. How could that work without rebirth? And the master listened and said, you're right. So he went out and said, see, the master said I was right. He said he couldn't have, he said I was right. No, he did say I was right, it means you're wrong. So the argument wasn't settled, so okay, we'll both go and see the master. So they went into the master's office together. And the first man recounted, he said, I said that rebirth isn't part of Buddhism because present moment and all that, and you said I was right. And now he comes in, and he talks about reincarnation and three knowledges and samsara and karma. You say he's right. We can't both be right. And the master thought for a while and said, yeah, that's right. And I love that story because in all of these disputes, it just depends on which way you look at it from. If you look at it from one way, Ajahn Brahm's right. We should have bhikkhunis. Look at it from another way, no way. We can't both be right, can we? That's right. So that cuts away at all these arguments and disputes. What we're saying, there will always be differences of opinion. There will always be discussions. And the nice thing about Buddhism is let's keep these civilized discussions. Respect each other's different way of doing things. Now let's respect the Mahayana for doing Mahayana things, the Theravada for doing Theravada things, the Vajrayana for doing Vajrayana things, lay people for doing lay people, monks for doing monk things. So that's the most important lesson, that when we take sides and we disrespect each other, that's when we're disrespecting the Buddha. So differences of opinion will always occur. Accept that, that's part of life. But don't get upset at the other person and try and bring them down. And that way, in a marriage, marriage is a unity of differences. People with different ideas, different ways of looking at things. But they can live together. So, of course, it will pass. It's already passing mostly. So, just most of the people are just, all the sort of the hot air is finished now. We've got to be very careful with hot air, with global warming. We've got to sort of keep cool to keep this planet cool. Is it correct for a person to correct others if they have a wrong view of life? However, the person is not sure whether his own view is right. Now, come on, we're always correcting other people, aren't we? So my master Ajahn Chah used to say, look at other people only 5% of the time, at most, yourself 95% of the time. So stop around correcting other people. So, just if you want to do anything, correct yourself. How are we doing for time? I haven't actually started the talk yet. But I think people are having fun, so that's good enough. So, when's the time for a break, Lai Ping? Shall we carry on for a little while? Break is now. Okay, so is it right that I've just answered questions, or would it be more right if I gave a talk? Which one is right? Can they both be right? Yeah, that's called right view. Okay, so what do we do now?